So we're introducing ourselves. Good morning. My name is Benita Hopkins, and I currently serve as the co-chair of the San Francisco Collaborative Against Human Trafficking.
Good morning. It's an honor to be here. Rose McCarr. I'm the founder and principal attorney and executive director of Justice at Last. We're a legal service provider, and we serve the entire Bay Area, and we exclusively work with survivors of human trafficking.
Good morning. My name is Raul Perales. I am the council representative for District 3, which is downtown San Jose.
Good morning. My name is Mauricio Velarde. I am the Director of Compliance in Santa Clara County.
My name is Armando Lopez, y I am víctima de human trafficking.
I am Maria Garcia, and I am here to interpret for Arnoldo.
My name is Ruth Silvertobe, and I'm the Legal Services Chair of the South Bay Coalition to End Human Trafficking. We're the local effort that responds to human trafficking in Santa Clara and San Benito County. I also supervise a workers' rights clinic at the Alexander Community Law Center, and I coordinate the Santa Clara County Wage Theft Coalition.
Well, again, good morning, and thank you all for your introductions, and thank you for being here this morning, as well as you. Thank you so much. Ruth, we will start with you with our first question, and that is, can you tell us more about the Responsible Construction Ordinance?
Thank you for the question, Benita. I did want to start by saying that the film was very moving, and that the South Bay Coalition and other coalitions were at the operation in the East Bay when this trafficking occurred, and the individuals were brought out of the warehouse, and the injuries were so bad that there was a mobile medical unit there. Construction is an area where workers are very vulnerable to wage theft and exploitation. And the Wage Theft Coalition, plus partners like Mauricio and Local 393, Building Trades, have proposed legislation. And one of the laws is the Responsible Construction Ordinance. And we're trying to get that passed in San Jose. We already got it passed in Sunnyvale and in Milpitas. And it requires contractors and subcontractors like that Joe Torres to disclose wage theft judgments. Mr. Torres had owed a lot of money to a lot of workers, and if there had been this disclosure requirement, then this may not have happened. Also, they're required to pay those judgments before a certificate of occupancy is granted. In other words, they can't occupy the building until they pay off those judgments. Also, back in 2016, we were able to get a wage theft policy for businesses or individuals who contract with the city of San Jose. And that was pretty strong. It required disclosure of judgments, but also the city would not award a contract if there was an unpaid judgment or there were repeat offenders. And I do want to thank Council Member Perales for his support. We did have support, and we're very lucky to have him and other council members who voted for it. The only flaw in this is it didn't include public works. We wanted it to include it, but the city said, well, there's the Labor Commission. However, the State Labor Commission is beset with staff shortages and huge backlogs, and the city has to include public works in the wage theft policy. And Mauricio will talk more about that and why it's essential and how many violations there are. And I do want to talk about a couple of other laws that are in the process in the legislature. One of them is AB 1788, and that provides a mere slap on the wrist for hotels that benefit from trafficking, if they knew or should have known there is trafficking. And it only imposes a $1,000 fine, and we need to take strong action against businesses that benefit from trafficking. And so we need the legislature to pass a robust bill with full civil remedies, so that, for example, in this case, with Arnaldo, the subcontractor did the trafficking, but the contractor knew or should have known and would have benefited. And under federal law, and even in Texas, if you would believe it, there's a strong law that says you can sue for emotional distress, for punitive damages civilly. We don't have that in California, and instead they're proposing this slap on the wrist, which we don't want. Also, there's a bill now in the legislature which would establish a centralized location at the Department of Industrial Relations that would investigate and prosecute complaints alleging labor trafficking. And that's something we didn't have. There's so much focus on sex trafficking, but not enough on labor trafficking everywhere you look. Not that we don't want to go after people that are exploiting people and forcing them to sell their body for sex, but labor trafficking is a crime. It's a horrible thing, and we need to make sure that the focus is on labor trafficking. There's another law, quickly, for foreign labor contractors. A lot of times we see people that are trafficked through foreign labor trafficking, and this bill, which is AB 364, unfortunately, it only applies to non-agricultural workers, and we want it to apply to agricultural workers too. So those are the bills that we think are really important, and hopefully, if they pass and they're properly enforced, will prevent the kind of trafficking that we have seen in this film and that Arnaldo had to endure.
Thank you, Ruth, for letting us know what this ordinance will do and what we can do as citizens to get other bills passed. I'm sure everyone is going to want to get from you later those bills.
And we are going to ask people to sign postcards too, because that's going to be very important. And I know Councilmember Perales will advocate for it as well.
Yes. But firstly, I want to move on to Arnaldo and first say thank you. Gracias for telling your story. And every time I see the film, I'm moved and I learn a little bit more. So thank you. Gracias. So is there anything you'd like to share since the film with us?
Algo que quisiera compartir desde que tuve la oportunidad de hacer esta película.
Pues quisiera compartir muchas cosas, pero no sé qué sería importante para ustedes escucharlo.
He would like to share a lot of things, but he's not sure about what is important for you to listen.
Take your time. It's okay. Well, as we continue on, maybe there'll be some things that will come to mind that you would like us to know how you're doing. So, moving on. Mauricio, can you please share what you've observed as gaps in the current legal structure in San Jose that have contributed to exploitation and trafficking?
Thank you for the question. I am also a passionate individual, so forgive me for if I don't come across as calm but you get to see the emotion, and you saw the film. How can anyone without half a heart? I mean, if someone even seen this video, this place we packed out the door around the corner. So it's very frustrating to me, and I don't hide my feelings. I wear my feelings on my sleeve when it comes to advocating for against this. And so the gap, to answer your question, is, to me, it's very clear. It's enforcement. We do have certain laws, regulations. Sounds like a charter city. They've adopted a lot of the public works within the state regarding prevailing wage. And just enforcement. Let me give you an example. Everybody I've been involved in, all projects, including this one, so you saw from the film, you saw all this. The guy went to jail. The city did nothing. Raul Perales was the only one that, there's a lot of good people in the city council. Raul Perales is the only one from day one, years ago, when I went to city council and spoke about wage stuff, ironically about Silvery Towers, giving millions to them and not have any worker protection policies or anything involved. He said, if there's something going on here, anything bad, I want to know. He said that from day one. And so he's always been an advocate for us. But the enforcement within the city, staying focused on this regional area, I would ask questions, I'd get crickets. Nothing's ever happened. So this continues. And every company I've gone after, I told the city, I told whomever, the authorities, the state, different agencies, DIR's told me at the highest level that clearly it's not enough. They've told me this behind the scenes. And so when this happens, these guys, these bad actors, these contractors, they can act with impunity. So for instance, it's like a bank robber robbing 10 banks, gets away, they land the time, he gets caught. The only consequence is to give him a fraction of that money on his way out. That's exactly what happened. That's not hyperbole. That's exactly what happens. So it's not just the legislature that's really important, the policies, the regulations, it's the ordinances, it's the enforcement. There's already mechanisms in place, however, we don't enforce it. So if you're on the highway and speed limit says 55, and everyone's going 65, 70, 80, if there's not a police officer there or a CHP or someone that's gonna even just be there and have a consequence, everyone's gonna ignore them. So you have to have enforcement. And you could just imagine Arnoldo, he's just one of many. Just last week, I was investigating a project in Fremont where they're doing a cash payment. They're mostly Spanish-speaking individuals come over. We went to the authorities, went to a lawyer. The lawyer said, they're not gonna do anything because we've gone to them with witnesses, with everything. In this particular scheme, they're Spanish-speaking people, some of them undocumented. And what's even more hurtful for me, it's the Hispanic people also who are doing the damage. It's not like a white supremacist abusing the workers, the Hispanics for racist reasons or whatever. It's our own kind. That's even more infuriating to me. But again, it goes back to compliance and enforcement. So forgive me for, but obviously, I mean, this happens everywhere all the time. And if we don't have enforcement of these policies, the things that we're all advocating for, Ruth Silver knows more than anybody. She's always out there doing the work. Raul Perales, we need more people like Raul Perales. They're gonna say, hey, and Raul Perales, I'll tell you, for the record, he was standing shoulder to shoulder at Silver Tower. He was there advocating for us. And he said, shame on me, he said, this is my jurisdiction, this is my area. So he took full accountability. We need more people like him to do that. So again, forgive me for seeming to go on and on, but how can you not be passionate about something like this? It's just incredible to me, but enforcement to me, and that's what I do. There's millions of dollars just in San Jose. These are not anecdotal situations I'm speaking of. These are things I have personal knowledge, and you can go to the news, Google Mauricio Velarde wage theft, and these articles will come out. So again, it's just something that I've personally been involved in, and I'm speaking directly to my experience, not something I'm seeing outside. So thank you for your time.
I would like to say one thing, which is a year before Silvery Towers happened, Local 393 was out in the streets with 1,000 people, workers, saying something is going on here. They were all there. I was there. Raul Perales was there, and no one paid attention. And then a year later, there's, fortunately, these brave workers went to law enforcement. They investigated for a very long time and kept them in that situation, and then finally they got out of there.
So what I hear you saying, that some of the gaps are finding more, it rests on us as the people who vote to vote into office more people like Congressman Perales. And Arnaldo is just one case. There are many cases such as this. So thank you so much for sharing. And Congressman Perales, I'll focus the next question with you. What have been some of the efforts that the San Jose City Council is taking, or that you'd like to see them take to get these laws passed?
And sorry, council member, but you either are a fortune teller and maybe predicting the future, or we'll see. It's okay. Congress will hire. So, and I want to say, first off, again, thank you as well. I know we didn't get to say thank you, Jennifer. Jennifer, thank you so much for putting this video together. Thank you, Arnaldo, as we've already said, for your willingness to share your story. And because it hasn't been stated yet, we've mentioned Silvery Towers a couple of times. There is a development just down the street here, a high-rise tower in San Jose that Mr. Joe Torres and the same human traffic victims were working on here. So this part of the story, this isn't something that happened just in San Francisco, or happens it happened right here in San Jose, and it's happening still today throughout our entire country. And that's why it was so important for me to want to ensure that this story could continue to be told, that we can meet people like Arnaldo that are willing to tell their story. Because yes, I think quite frankly, we need individuals that are in elected office that are willing to see this. And as Mauricio says, right, it really, where it hits you inside, and you realize you have to do something about it. And I would say, as policymakers, right, for me, when I first learned, I didn't know any of this, the personal story, the stuff that Mauricio gets to see day in and day out. But learning about the exploitation that was happening, we fought to create a stronger wage theft ordinance in 2019. It was finally passed here in the city to try and continue our part to catch this from happening, right? Quite frankly, I will tell you, I don't believe there's any way that we can prevent this from happening. I think there's continually going to be people out there that try to exploit the system, exploit our laws across the board. You name it, sex trafficking, job trafficking, worker trafficking. Mauricio was pointing out simple things, violating other laws. That enforcement is so important, because I think people will continue to try to find ways to skirt the system, to break the laws, to exploit people. And so we need to not only have better mechanisms to monitor it, but we also have to have better mechanisms to enforce it. And that also means people, because we can't just have the policies. And as Mauricio points out, and he knows our office here in the City of Equity Assurance that is overseeing just the city project, just the public works projects, where your tax dollars are going to pay for a project that benefits us as a city. We find, and Mauricio finds it, digging through, right, we find violations continually. And unfortunately today, it's a complaint-based system, right? We really rely on the workers, right, to complain, or individuals like Mauricio to try to go out there and identify workers that are willing to share their story and make a complaint. And so in my mind, if we were to invest more in the people, in the oversight of this, That would be tremendously helpful in the work that we do. But we also need to create better policies, and specifically, as Ruth was saying, around private projects. Because today, the city has a ton of oversight over our public projects. And as I mentioned already, we see violations on public projects. You can imagine, with the lack of oversight on private projects, the number of violations that happen. We need a nexus, right? There's a bit of a gap there where we don't always have the same level of authority that we would want. That's where we can create policies like responsible construction ordinances and things that we can do to be able to better that. And so that's the work that I think the city can improve on.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So Rose, in your work with victims of trafficking and your experience there representing them, what kinds of, we've heard a lot about the laws already, and the legislation. As a direct service provider, what are some of the gaps you're finding, and what are some of the needs to really help victims of trafficking?
Thank you, Benita, for the question. And I want to echo what's been already shared here today about the laws, and I'll definitely get to answer the question that you proposed. But I want to recognize, as we already have all Narlo for here today, and not just that, but for the film, and having the courage to share his story. Because as you've heard, we are primarily relying on the victims themselves to come forward and articulate what has happened, and not appreciating or understanding the humiliation that's involved in that, the shame, the guilt, and also with the constant coercion, the constant threats by the trafficker, the fear, the genuine fear that something is going to happen to them or their family members, a loved one, like the serious consequences of coming forward and telling people that they don't necessarily know, that they might not even trust. They might be coming from a country where you wouldn't trust law enforcement. And we're asking them, our laws are set up right now and focused on the victim and the victim coming forward. So I want to recognize the courageous strength and passion and ability to come forward and do that. And to be here today as well, it takes a lot, and I'm inspired by his courage and for him being here today.
Yeah.
And likewise, as a legal service provider and a victim service provider, we see this day in and day out, the realities. And I think while laws are critical and enforcement equally important, it's also a societal issue, right? We need to understand that labor trafficking is by far more prevalent, not just here in the Bay or California or the United States, but globally. Labor trafficking happens more than sex trafficking. We know sex trafficking sells in the media, right? And so that's what we see. If you were to Google right now, you'd find information about sex trafficking, but not the labor trafficking. And again, labor trafficking is harder to police. It's often in legal businesses, as we see here with the hotel construction. Why would we question that? So it's really also on the society to get involved, to understand. Justice at Last focuses on training the community and service providers that are working with victims to understand the red flags of trafficking, because it's really critical when a survivor of human trafficking is identified that they have an opportunity to speak with an attorney so they can understand what their rights are as a victim, what their rights are to move forward, the immigration relief that we have. We have very specific immigration laws that protect victims from coming forward and telling and cooperating with police about what happened to them. But how many victims know this? They don't have access to that information unless they're connected with service providers, and that's why it's really critical, again, on the community and society as a whole to understand the critical role that community-based organizations play in supporting survivors of trafficking, and not just trafficking, survivors generally, but how important that role is. And so for us as a legal service provider, what we have seen, and we provide comprehensive support services because we understand that even though there's a survivor and they need to come forward and that maybe they are cooperating with law enforcement and they agree to testify in court, that they might have other needs. They likely have housing needs. They likely need access to benefits, to food support, to ESL so they can communicate better. so they can get access to work training, so they can be able to move forward and no longer be vulnerable. Because I think what we see even in this film is that despite the fact that Leonardo is out of the trafficking situation, he's still vulnerable. He ends up working with another employer who there's wage theft, and he's told by the employer, deny that you've worked for me because of this injury, because he doesn't want to suffer the consequences of workers' compensation. So it again goes back to how important it is for, once a victim is identified, that they get connected to a community-based organization that can help them get connected to services and support, from general basic benefits. And because our laws, again, we have specific benefits for survivors when they come forward, but where they can get basic housing supportive needs, they can get access to food support, and how important that is. So that's just like generally, but then also I want to touch on the laws themselves. Right now, labor trafficking, if a defendant is found guilty, it is a felony, but it is not a violent crime, and it is not considered a serious felony. And so the consequences are significantly less than if somebody was accused and prosecuted and found guilty of sex trafficking. And that we also, again, as a society, need to look at that and understand that, and to make changes in our laws, and then go back to the critical part of enforcing our laws, so ensure that it is happening. And so victims do have rights, but the gaps are wide, and it's just a matter of getting individuals connected. And so I think I might have already covered that, but the other critical part also is the wage theft aspect of it, and ensuring that, well, maybe there might not rise to that level of human trafficking by the legal definition. Individual victims have rights to wage theft, and Ruth might want to talk on that as well. The other thing I wanted to just share is that on behalf of Justice at Last, we have staff that wanted to say thank you for sharing your story. In particular, Saren Choi and Bora Lee both work now for Justice at Last, and they formerly were at Apilo, and they just wanted to recognize and say hello. Thank you for coming forward.
Thank you, Rose. And Arnaldo, please still let me know whenever you're ready to say something. But one of the things...
Yes, I want to say something.
Okay.
Tal vez no tenga mucha relación con lo que voy a decir, pero si vemos en la sociedad ahora, en estos tiempos, cómo los valores morales están cambiando, y tomando como ejemplo, sin querer hacer política, el allanamiento a la casa de Donald Trump por parte del FBI es clásico de un país como Venezuela, no quiero decir México, mexicano, pero si dejamos que eso suceda, al igual que dejar que suceda, que se vuelva normal ver que se abusa de la gente en el trabajo, vamos a peor. Entonces, quisiera rescatar eso. No podemos permitir que un hecho de por sí malo, dejar que se normalice en la sociedad. Creo que hay mucha gente buena que no está hablando. Hay que invitarlos a que hablen y que se sepa que no se va a tolerar ese tipo de conductas, al menos en esta sociedad. No puede ser normal que alguien abuse y se quede impune el abuso, y que la otra persona cargue por las consecuencias, ¿no? Eso.
Well, he would like to share that maybe it's not related to the same topic over here, but he just want to let everyone know that what happened at the White House with Donald Trump, it wasn't right when people went into the house. And if that happens, like maybe not only here, it may be maybe in other countries too, Venezuela, other countries, but if we don't say anything about what happened, that is not good. And there is a lot of people outside who is not speaking, who is not telling us what is right or what they don't like it. If we let people get abused at their jobs, then that is gonna continue. So we need to tell them like to stop what is not right, what is not correct.
Good job. Agreed.
I wanted to just touch on wage theft with all of you here. We have some resources, and a lot of times it may look like wage theft, but there's also labor trafficking, because there's force or fraud or some sort of coercion, threats to call ICE, threats to call the police if you leave, taking somebody's passport, telling them they have to keep working to work off a debt. And so if you see something and you don't know what it is, you think there's something wrong, please say something. And there is the human trafficking hotline, and you have that number. But we also have the Office of Labor Standards Enforcement has a line, and it's 866-870-7725. We have lawyers on there that speak English, Spanish, Tagalog, Vietnamese, and Mandarin, and they also screen for human trafficking. You can also call law enforcement, or you can call the hotline, the national hotline that's there, and it's there 24 hours a day. It's not law enforcement, it's private, but they connect with us. They connect with the South Bay Coalition. And not only does law enforcement come out, but people like Rose, like Perla, who was going to be here from Community Solutions, but was unable to be here, and they will provide the services that Rose talked about, medical, health related, housing related, legal, because you can get a T or trafficking visa, which is what Arnaldo got, and you're able to get a green card and citizenship. So we do have resources. We also have the Alexander Community Law Center as well, that takes and will help you with wage theft cases and represent you. So I did want to point out that we have these resources here. And there's also people like Mauricio that are doing compliance work and every day weeding out wage theft and trying to combat it.
Thank you, Ruth. This question is for the whole panel. Did you have something to say, Arnaldo? Oh.
No.
Okay. This is for the whole panel, and I think we've heard some of the changes in laws that can begin, like Rose was mentioning, labor trafficking, convictions that are usually shorter than, say, sex trafficking convictions. But the question is, what kinds of laws, policies, infrastructure, education, or frameworks would be most effective in protecting workers so that exploitation doesn't happen in the first place to any of you?
So thank you for that great question. Right now, we are negotiating with the City of San Jose staff. We went to our partners with South Bay Labor, with the building trades, and for myself, I've been here for about 6 years, and I kind of sat back and let things happen, but like Arnaldo was alluding to, good people can't just sit back and do nothing. People just can't just let this be normalized. So I went to our partners and I said, look, I love you guys, but I'm not gonna put up with this. You guys are proposing these things respectfully, and I'm not gonna sign on to that. This is what I'm looking for. I need your support on this. It's a good thing. I'll fight for it. I'm already negotiating with them. I'm creating the leverage. So please, I need your support. And so enforcement and people not sitting back and putting up and letting this be normalized. I think that's the mechanism, the theme I want to get across for myself.
Great point, great point.
Yeah, happy to add to it. And I think the first point I'll make is the point I made a little bit earlier. Unfortunately, I don't think we're ever going to prevent this from happening. Can we prevent it from happening as frequently through more enforcement? Absolutely, right? Because then people are going to see that there are real consequences. People are going to see that there's somebody watching and looking out there, and that is going to force more people to be compliant. But even in that, if you even just listening to that line, right, force people to be compliant. Unfortunately, that's what we have to do, right? Because not everybody out there is with goodwill and an intent, and that they say, hey, I'd like to pay everybody a living wage, right, and make sure that they have the health benefits. As Arnoldo realized, right, even getting another job, right, where, well, now I'm just getting dropped off at the hospital, being told, well, you didn't work here. So I think that is going to continue to happen, unfortunately. So I do think that we can put in place, again, more resources on oversight, better laws and mechanisms to be able to have our hand in oversight in, especially again, the private sector, where today there's really very little oversight today, and that's where a lot of this abuse is so pervasive. And there are, as Ruth's saying, and actually, in fact, we've been working with our partners over the years, like in creating the wage theft or strengthening our wage theft ordinance. Actually, even today, just over the last couple of weeks, talking about maintaining the strength of our wage theft ordinance, because there's an interest in some of our city staff in making some amendments that would weaken it. And so I think that that's work that needs to continue to be done to continue that enforcement and oversight.
Thank you for that. And I think we have time for one more question. And you alluded just now, Councilman, I almost said Congressman again, Councilman, that the greatest need, or a great need, is in the private sector. That is where I work the most. So my question is to any of you: what kinds of collaborations across all of our sectors that are different, what kind of collaborations might help in getting these changes made that we need to see, desperately see?
Yeah, I'll start. So as Marisha was saying, over the years, right, working with organizations like our labor unions here, working with working partnerships, people like Ruth, people like Mauricio, elected officials, my office, right, being able to work in partnership to identify the problems and then create solutions, and then go through the challenge of creating these new policies or laws and getting them passed, because that also is not as easy as it sounds. Believe it or not, right, you would think, well, this sounds pretty logical, this is oversight that everybody would agree with. It actually has been extremely difficult, because over the years that I've been on the council, we have not had a majority of supportive council members nor a mayor that has wanted to put additional oversight on private development. And so, right, it's not as easy, right, as one might hope it would be. But those partnerships from the nonprofit, right, the public sector, government oversight, I think are really important, because I don't believe we're going to see the private sector step into this and willingly say, you know, how do we help? We see a little bit of that, right? We see some private sector businesses, right, wanting to say, how do we invite people like Mauricio in to do that? But that is far and few between, right, where we actually will see a willing partner within the private, especially the construction trades. And so I think that those partnerships are tremendously important. Having the right people in office, so that includes what we're doing today, educating the public, right, about the importance of this, and how do we ensure that you have individuals that are elected in office that are willing to do that work. Yes. And I'll pass it over to Ruth.
So I agree completely that we need collaboration with elected officials, the Wage Theft Coalition, the building trades, Mauricio's, South Bay Piping, Local 393. But I did want to say that San Jose has really come to this kicking and screaming, because we did get responsible construction in Milpitas. It just sailed through. And we also got it in Sunnyvale as well. And it's not just San Jose, there's other cities as well. And I agree private construction is a real problem, but I also want to say that we need public works in the wage theft policy, because they have been able to skate, and that's really what Mauricio and does, and the compliance officer do, because you can't leave it up to the state. We need local governments to step up. So I'm hoping, it's taken a really long time, and I don't understand they could just cut and paste from Sunnyvale. Why are they studying this so long? Why is it taking months and months and months? Because it was a priority 2 years ago, so it could have passed in San Jose. But they have told us, the staff, that responsible construction is coming up, and they're also going to hopefully put public works into the existing wage theft policy. The problem is, as Councilmember Perales said, is they want to weaken the existing policy, and because they say, what if someone bids and everybody who bids has unpaid wage theft or multiple wage theft judgments? Well, the only time that has happened in 6 years, and it was in 2016 that this passed, was with banks. And these banks were the only ones who could handle the $1 billion that the city of San Jose has. So that's not going to happen again. And it was a one-time thing, and they went to the council and got an exception. So there's no reason to water anything down. It's worked for 6 years. So it's a constant struggle, and that's why we need all of you. We need you to call your council members. We need you to sign those postcards. And we also need local organizations to work collaboratively, meet with the council members, because they are receptive to that.
So if I can respond to that as well. So collaboration is obviously very important. One of the things that I actually do is like Councilman Perales does, it doesn't matter to me what party, I reach across the aisle. I go speak with everybody. I invited everybody from city council here. It doesn't matter which side you work. So those collaborations are very important. I really want to, the unions are also very important. For instance, Local 393, plumber steam fitters from here, Ruth came to us and said, can you help some of these guys? I said, absolutely. We got Juan Gutierrez, we got Conrad here, we got Al Gonzalez. They came, they brought some of the workers in. They were very generous, and they subsidized these gentlemen at full scale, full journeyman scale, to get them back on their feet. So the unions are certainly one of the big elements here, one of the important prongs in all this. So just everybody, nonprofits, everybody, and having good councilmen like Perales. And I just want to say that Jennifer, thank you so much. This is just wonderful. I appreciate you doing this, and especially for taking, and I want to thank you, my friend. Thank you so much. And everybody here. So I'll end with that.
I'd like to step in and just, collaboration is critical from everyone here at the table, including you all in the audience. But we need to be mindful that we include the survivor, the lived experience voice. It can't be an afterthought. And it has to be compensated, right? We cannot ask for individuals to come forward, share their experiences and what they've lived through, and not be willing to compensate them for their time. They're much more than their story. They have this expertise because they've lived it. And I think that's what's critical and needs to be at the table when we're talking about collaboration, when we're talking about new laws, when we're talking about how do we go about enforcing those laws, when we talk about how do we communicate with the society as a whole about what is really at hand here. And as a crime victim rights attorney, and this is something I'm extremely passionate about, I also feel that we need to reevaluate our laws, in particular for survivors of human trafficking, when they do come forward and they are providing testimony. They're providing testimony in a courtroom that's not less than 6 feet away from the perpetrator, the one that threatened them day in and day out. If you tell anybody this story, there are serious consequences. And if you could think about coming forward, sharing that publicly in a courtroom, surrounded by individuals that are supporting the trafficker, just the impact of that alone, we need to recognize that. We need to provide testimonial accommodations for survivors of human trafficking, which we do not have as a whole. We have it for minors, and it's not particular for survivors of trafficking. So that's something that I think, in addition to the collaboration, is that we need to be mindful of that lived experience voice and that expertise that brings to the table, and to ensure that we compensate them for coming forward and explaining and sharing their lived experiences. Thank you.
Just wanted to add one other thank you on a partner of the creative arts. So Jennifer, Cinequest, Camera 3, this is an example of partnership as well, right? Where we're bringing in the creative arts in a very important topic. So thank you as well.
Thank you.
And as we close, I think that's a great ending. We have to remember the survivor and their story. It is their story, not our story to enjoy. Thank you all for being here today. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Arnaldo. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. A couple of things.
Oh, yeah, here.
We do need to wrap up quickly. I do want to introduce Jennifer Wong, the filmmaker. Before I do that, I just want to say, if you are interested in speaking about this film, I don't know if Jennifer will be in the lobby or something like that. We do need to clear out. But please, feel free to talk to her. We just have to get out of the theater. So here's Jennifer.
Sorry, I just wanted to say really quickly that in the lobby or in the cafe we'll have postcards that you can write to your congresspeople about some of the legislation that was talked about today. And also, Arnaldo didn't talk about it, but his truck was stolen. We've been doing a fundraiser. He actually got another car and then that was totaled. So we're trying to raise some money because he's currently unsheltered. So if you go to the website, treeclimbermedia.org, there's a GoFundMe. And I also circulated a newsletter sign up so you can get updates. But thank you so much for coming to talk about this very heavy thing on an early Saturday morning. And thank you so much to all of you. It's been amazing, and I'm in awe of everything you do.
Thank you.
Thank you. I second Jennifer. Thank you for coming. And please, everyone, come and see more Cinequest films. Have a great weekend. Thank you.